The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply. USAA.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay. With experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
From the Fifth Quarter Studio in Madison, Wisconsin, you're listening to the Coaching Youth Hoops Podcast.
They're playing
Basketball. Here's our hosts, Steve Collins. And Bill Flitter.
Coaches, welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Coaching Youth Hoops. I am your host, Coach Bill Flitter, and today we have a returning guest, six-time returning guest, and our resident, we'll call him our sports psychologist, Dr. Dave. Dave, how are you today?
I am doing well. It's great to see you.
Likewise, we appreciate you coming back on the show to share your expertise with us and all the coaches out there. Today, we're going to talk about emotional composure. But before we get started, a huge shout out to our sponsor, Game Changer. Coaches, head on over to gc.com/coaching youth hoops. Again, that's gc.com/coaching youth hoops. If you aren't using Game Changer, at least check it out. It's free. It will save you a ton of time in tracking stats. Your parents, grandparents can log on, see live action no matter where they are. It's just a great use of technology if you're a youth coach, and really any coach for that matter. Again, gc.com/coaching youth hoops. All right, David, tell us, and let's create a definition of what emotional composure is.
Oh, yeah. It's something that a lot of coaches don't necessarily directly address, but it's, in a nutshell, a simple definition is your ability to control your emotions in tough situations. It's what we would call emotional composure. And emotions are really important in sports. They play a role. We're human beings. We're not robots. So when we talk about emotions, I like to discuss in the context of motivation. Positive emotions such as excitement, joy or pride about being part of this team can really enhance our athletes' motivation and subsequently their performance. So I look at it as a positive drive where they can put forth more effort, where it helps drive them into focus and overcome challenges. But that's the positive side. There's also a negative side when we have these negative emotions. And as coaches, what we're trying to do is really help build resilience and how we can help our athletes channel that energy and overcome obstacles. So building resilience, I think, is important. That's why I'm a big fan of negative emotions as well. It's a great learning opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that thought on emotional composure, because you're absolutely right. It plays a huge role in all sports. Let's dive into. Let's first talk about the positive side of emotional composure and and I'd love to see where you take this. I'll just leave it at that. So what's the positive side?
Yeah, well, I'll say this for coaches. The first thing is to know that emotions are rooted in our bodies, our physiology. So,
Mhm.
anytime we're discussing emotions, I like to use the Goldilocks rule. So, too little is bad, too much is bad. What's the right amount, the sweet
Mhm.
spot? And that right amount varies based on the situation. So, if we unpack a little bit about the hormones going on within us, there's cortisol, the stress hormone, right? It's released by the adrenal
Mhm.
gland in response to stress. So, in small amounts, this cortisol can drive us into higher energy levels and alertness. But over time, high amounts of this cortisol actually hurt us. It impairs our ability to think clearly, to strategize. So, it's not good. So, the impact on performance for our athletes then is there's negative consequences over time. It increases our stress level. And when that happens, we're not thinking as clearly. We may not be thinking one or two passes forward. We may just be dealing with what's right in front of us. And then also, people get on edge a little bit, and that supportive culture that we're trying to build isn't there. So, most of our listeners may have heard of the Yerkes Dotson law. It's just basically a bell curve. And that's what I'm calling the Goldilocks principle. So our job as coaches is to navigate the positive and the negative emotions and make sure that we find that sweet spot. So if you think of that bell curve on a scale from say 1 to 10, 1 is low arousal and 10 is extreme arousal, we want to find that 5 or that sweet spot. And so what that means as coaches is sometimes we have to adjust our tactics and help our athletes adjust their tactics so they find their 5 or their sweet spot.
Well, yeah, yeah, and sometimes that's really difficult. I mean, we've all seen the situations, and probably as you know, we've probably seen a video of it where athletes, young athletes, lose control over their emotions, stomp off the court. Obviously, that's the far, I guess, right of the bell curve, where it's a 10, uh, and then. Uh, we don't want we never want that, but there should be. This is what I always struggle with is, and we talked about this earlier off air when we were first talking about this subject, which is this I always have in a loss particular it comes out like we're talking. An athlete is hard on themselves, right? It's like they're feeling bad because they think that their efforts resulted in their performance, sorry, led to that loss in a game, right? And we know as coaches, generally speaking, right, that it's the cumulative of effort with everybody over the course of that time that led to the win or loss. But they feel because they performed poorly or what they think is poor performance that it led to the loss. And I guess, that not even necessarily in a loss, I've had some players who in a win just felt like they performed badly and were hard on themselves. So, you know, give me some tools, tips, and thoughts on how to deal with someone who is just maybe a little bit, they're not at a 10, but they definitely feel bad. You want about their performance. You want to obviously recognize their emotions, but at the same time, depending on the age, but how do you handle that particular situation? Because I know as coaches we all run into that. Does that question make sense?
Sure.
Am I driving? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the first thing I would say is recognize that emotions are raw initial reactions to
Mm-hmm.
events, and those are going to go up and go down. Whereas feelings are more of the cognitive, subjective interpretation of them, and those can be long term. So, as a coach, I would recognize that emotions; those are going to come and go. But and then throughout the season, I work on those subjective feelings that yeah, we're a great team. Yeah, I'm on my path towards mastery, etc. But the emotions in the moments, it's a physiological response. So sometimes we have to use physiological tools to get at it. And the cognitive type tools may not necessarily have the focus right away. So let's take your example of an athlete who is hard on him or herself after a
That's right.
game.
Yeah.
So I would say we want to train our athletes to have this bounce back. Can they be resilient? So one, I would allow that athlete a little time to, one, acknowledge the poor effort in their eyes, whether it's objective or subjective. And I would say, all right, we have to go through this process of the immediate aftermath and just allow them to express their emotions in the locker room, perhaps, whether it's being frustrated, etc. But I set a time limit because I know emotions can come up and down. They're not long lasting. So I set a short-term time limit. Say, all right, we're going to take the next 2 to 5 minutes and we're going to talk about one thing that just went awful. The wheels fell off the bus. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to transition into what's one thing we can hang our hat on that we did great on. And then I'm letting them come out. I'm letting the physiology reset within a time limit. And then I do know that this could take perhaps a few hours for them to process. But I set the expectation that you're not coming back to practice tomorrow with this Debbie Downer type attitude, right? So that bounce back, that resilience is key, just not for sports, but for everything in life.
Sure, yeah. And that's a great teacher about sports, right? Is it carries over to life too, right? A bad test that they might have, or a particular situation that they encountered with a friend, right? And their emotions are high or low in that case, yeah.
And then from that thought, I would just facilitate a great reflection process. So how can we debrief as a team? Can we start analyzing or watching the film? So I'd give examples, whatever the coach wants to do to highlight both the positive and perhaps those opportunities for growth, because they're always there. But then as a coach, it's important then to start shifting towards the positive reinforcement. So highlight those positive aspects that they did well, that they can build on. And then the next step, I would say, is let's start setting goals for the next game. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's a progression to, I'm not going to shut them down because emotions are part of the human experience, but I'm going to give them a certain amount of time to dwell on it. And then I'm going to quickly try to transition into let's audit this. Let's watch the footage and then layer on constructive ways to positively reinforce and set goals moving forward.
So a lot of times what I do in that particular situation is, I'll obviously I'll see it visibly on them. And I'm talking about, let's talk about like the negative emotions, right? I played poorly and I see it, right? Their body language. Head down, shoulders slumped, very quiet, introspective. And of course, I always ask, hey, what's on your mind? Right. And sometimes it's the child response, oh, nothing. Or sometimes it's like, I didn't feel like I played that well. So then what I typically do next is kind of unpack that. Well, why? Why do you think? Or what's leading to this? What did you think you did that led you to this feeling of, the feeling you're having about your poor performance? Is that a good first question? Because I'm letting them express their feelings, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.